I never thought a snow shovel could become a weapon of suburban warfare. But here I was at 7 in the morning, staring at Margaret Pemberton through my kitchen window, as she marched across the frosted grass toward my house with that look on her face. I am Xavier Bradford, a mechanical engineer who moved to Pine Ridge, Colorado, 2 years ago for the mountain views and peaceful living. What I got instead was Margaret Pemberton, the 48-year-old president of our homeowners association, who treated her position like she was running a small dictatorship. She had that particular haircut, you know, the one where it is shorter in the back and angles down toward the front. Her highlights were always fresh, her yoga pants always pristine, and her sense of entitlement always maxed out. I opened the door before she could assault my doorbell. "Xavier," she said, not even pretending to smile, "we need to discuss your porch situation." My porch situation. I glanced behind me at my small front porch. My snow shovel leaned against the railing next to my ice scraper and a bag of sidewalk salt. "You mean my snow removal equipment?" "It is unsightly," Margaret said, pulling out her phone. She showed me a photo she had taken of my house. Section 12. Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that all equipment, tools, and outdoor items must be stored in a garage or shed, not displayed on porches or front yards. It is winter, Margaret, in Colorado. I need these things accessible so I can actually clear my driveway and walk. Then get up earlier and put them away when you are finished. She crossed her arms. I have already documented this violation. You have 48 hours to comply or face a fine of $50 per day. I felt my jaw tighten. Are you serious right now? The rules exist for a reason, Xavier. They maintain property values and community standards. If we let one person leave their equipment out, soon everyone will, and Pine Ridge will look like a junkyard. It is a snow shovel, not a rusted-out car on blocks. Rules are rules, she said, turning on her heel. 48 hours. I watched her walk back to her house, which sat directly across the street from mine. Her husband, Greg, was a long-haul trucker, gone most of the time, which meant Margaret had unlimited free time to patrol the neighborhood looking for violations. She had already sent warnings to the Johnsons for their Christmas lights being up 3 days past the January 5th deadline. Fined the Chens for parking their RV on the street for 4 hours while they loaded it, and forced old Mr. Peterson to repaint his shutters because the color had faded to a shade that was not on the approved color list. I went inside and called my buddy Derek, who lived 2 neighborhoods over. "She is insane," I told him after explaining the situation. "It is functional equipment that I use literally every day right now. We got 8 inches of snow last night." "Dude, that is HOAs for you," Derek said. "That is why I specifically bought in a non-HOA neighborhood. I can paint my house purple if I want." "Please do not paint your house purple. Not the point. What are you going to do?" I looked out my window at Margaret's house. Her driveway was pristine, cleared by the snow removal service she paid for. Her 2-car garage sat closed, and I knew she parked her white Lexus SUV in there every night. But what caught my attention was her front window, the big picture window in her living room that faced the street. From that window, she had a perfect view of the entire cul-de-sac, which was how she caught everyone's violations. She probably sat there with her coffee every morning, surveying her kingdom. "I am going to comply with her request," I said slowly. "Really? You are just going to give in?" "I am going to move my snow gear." She said it could not be on my porch or front yard. She did not say anything about my driveway. Derek laughed. "Oh, this is going to be good." After I hung up, I grabbed my snow shovel, ice scraper, salt bag, and the snow brush I used for my truck. I also retrieved my spare shovel from the garage, my old one that I kept as a backup. Then I walked down to my driveway and positioned everything in a neat line right at the end, closest to the street. Technically, it was still my property. The driveway belonged to the homeowner, not the HOA. And since Margaret had not specifically said I could not put things there, I was in compliance. The brilliant part: my driveway was positioned just right so that if you were sitting in Margaret's living room looking out that big picture window, my snow gear now sat directly in her sight line. Not blocking her view entirely, but definitely noticeable. Every time she looked out, she would see my little collection of winter tools. I arranged them carefully, making sure they looked organized, not messy. The shovels stood upright, leaning against each other. The salt bag sat perfectly square. The ice scraper and snow brush lay parallel. It actually looked kind of nice in a functional sort of way. Then I went inside, made myself some coffee, and waited. It took Margaret less than an hour. My doorbell rang at 8:15. When I opened it, her face was red, and not from the cold. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded. "Following the HOA rules," I said calmly. "You said I could not keep my equipment on my porch or front yard. It is now in my driveway. Problem solved. You are blocking my view. I am on my own property, Margaret. The driveway is part of my property. You said to move it from the porch, so I did. Unless there is another rule I am not aware of." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "This is deliberately antagonistic. This is me storing my winter equipment in an accessible location that complies with HOA regulations," I said. "Was there anything else?" She stabbed her finger toward me. "I will be reviewing the bylaws. If there is any possible violation here, I will find it. You do that. Have a great day, Margaret." I closed the door and allowed myself a small smile. Through the window, I watched her stomp back to her house. She went straight to that picture window, and I could see her standing there, staring at my driveway. She stood there for a solid 5 minutes before yanking her curtains closed. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA. Margaret had called an emergency board meeting to discuss driveway storage policies. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at the community center. All homeowners were welcome to attend. I forwarded the email to Derek with a laughing emoji. His response: "I am coming to this meeting. I need to see this. You do not even live here. Meetings are open to the public, right? I am public." Thursday arrived, and I showed up at the community center at 6:55 for the 7 o'clock meeting. The room was more crowded than I expected. Apparently, word had spread about the snow gear incident, and people were curious. I recognized most of my neighbors, including the Johnsons, the Chens, and Mr. Peterson, all previous victims of Margaret's enforcement crusade. Derek showed up at 6:58, carrying a bag of popcorn. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered. "What? I came straight from the movies." No sense wasting it. Margaret called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. She sat at the front table with the other 2 board members, Richard Holloway and Sandra Mitchell. Richard was a retired accountant who mostly did whatever Margaret wanted to avoid conflict. Sandra was a real estate agent who genuinely cared about property values, which made her sympathetic to Margaret's concerns, even if she did not always agree with the methods. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret began. "We have called this meeting to address a growing concern about driveway storage and its impact on neighborhood aesthetics." "You mean you called this meeting because you are mad at me?" I said from the back row. Several people turned to look at me. A few smiled. Margaret's face tightened. "This is not personal, Xavier. This is about maintaining standards." Then why was this never an issue before? People have been keeping shovels and salt in their driveways all winter, every winter. "Other people keep them discreetly positioned," Margaret said. Your items are prominently displayed in a manner that draws attention and disrupts the visual harmony of the street. Visual harmony, Mr. Peterson spoke up. Margaret, it is a snow shovel. We live in Colorado. Everyone has them. The location is deliberately obstructive, Margaret insisted. It is positioned to block sight lines from neighboring properties. My property, my driveway, I said. I moved the items exactly as you requested. You said they could not be on my porch. They are not. If you want to change the rules now, that requires a full board vote and homeowner approval according to the HOA bylaws. Sandra leaned forward. He is actually correct, Margaret. We cannot create new restrictions without proper process. If his items are on his property and not violating existing bylaws, we do not have grounds for enforcement. They are creating a visual obstruction. To your window, I said. Not to traffic, not to pedestrians, not to any common areas, just to your personal view from your living room. That is not an HOA issue. That is a you issue. The room erupted in murmurs and a few scattered claps. Margaret's face went from red to almost purple. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion and review the relevant bylaws more carefully before making any decisions. I second that, Sandra said quickly. Margaret looked like she wanted to argue, but she was outvoted. Fine. Meeting adjourned. People filed out and several neighbors stopped to talk to me. Mrs. Johnson patted my arm. Good for you, dear. Someone needs to stand up to her. She has been out of control lately. Mr. Chen nodded. She fined us $200 for that RV thing. We were just loading supplies for a camping trip. Took us 4 hours because we had to keep moving it around the block. As Derek and I walked to our cars, he was grinning. That was better than the movie. Did you see her face? This is not over, I said. She is going to escalate. What can she do? You are following the rules. People like Margaret always find a way. I was right. The next morning, I discovered that someone had filed a complaint with the county about my driveway potentially violating setback requirements. A county inspector showed up on Tuesday to measure the distance from my property line to where my snow gear sat. After 20 minutes of careful measurement and photograph taking, he confirmed that everything was well within legal limits. Who filed the complaint? I asked him. Anonymous tip, he said, but his expression told me he knew exactly who had called. On Wednesday, I found a notice on my door from the town's code enforcement office. Someone had reported that I might be running a commercial snow removal business from my home without proper licensing, citing the excessive equipment visible from the street. The code enforcement officer, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, showed up on Thursday. Are you operating a business? She asked. No, I am a mechanical engineer. I work for Henderson Manufacturing. Those are my personal snow removal tools for my own property. How many shovels do you have? 2. One is old, one is new. I keep a backup. She looked at my driveway, then at Margaret's house across the street, then back at me. Let me guess. HOA president, how did you know? Because this is the third bogus complaint I have gotten from this neighborhood in the past 6 months, and they all involve disputes with the same house. She nodded toward Margaret's place. She called about the Chens running an illegal hotel because they had relatives visiting for 2 weeks. She called about the Johnsons having too many cars because their adult son moved home temporarily. Both complaints were completely unfounded. So what happens now? I document that no business is being operated, file my report, and move on with my life. But I will tell you the same thing I told the others. Document everything. Every interaction, every complaint, every communication with your HOA. If this escalates into harassment, you will want a paper trail. Patricia left, and I took her advice. I created a folder on my computer and started documenting. the initial complaint about my porch, the photos Margaret had taken, the emergency board meeting, the county inspector visit, the code enforcement complaint. I included dates, times, and details of every conversation. That weekend, we got hit with another snowstorm. 14 inches this time, the heaviest of the season. I was up at 5:30 Saturday morning, clearing my driveway before work. I had picked up a weekend shift at Henderson to help finish a rush project. As I worked, I noticed Margaret's snow removal service arrive at her house around 6. 2 guys with a plow truck and snowblowers made quick work of her driveway. They were done in 15 minutes. My property took me almost an hour, doing it by hand with my shovel. When I finished, I put my shovel back in its spot at the end of my driveway, along with the other equipment. I was exhausted, sweaty despite the cold, and running late. I was getting in my truck when Margaret emerged from her house, wrapped in a puffy white coat. "Xavier," she called out. "Wait." I really did not have time for this, but I paused. "What?" She hurried over, her boots crunching in the snow. "I want to talk to you about resolving this situation." "What situation?" "I am storing my equipment on my property." "Yes, but it is creating tension in the neighborhood." "Perhaps we could come to a compromise." I was genuinely surprised. Margaret Pemberton did not compromise. "What kind of compromise?" "What if you stored your equipment against the side of your house instead? It would still be accessible but less visible from the street." I considered this. The side of my house was actually less convenient, further from my driveway, and would require me to walk through deeper snow to access everything. "Why should I move it when I am not violating any rules?" "Because it would show good faith and community spirit," Margaret said. Her tone was almost pleasant, which made me suspicious. "We are neighbors, Xavier. We should try to get along." "We could get along fine if you stopped reporting me to county inspectors and code enforcement over completely legal activities." Her pleasant expression cracked slightly. "I do not know what you mean." "Margaret, I am not an idiot. Anonymous complaints right after our HOA meeting. Code enforcement specifically mentioning excessive equipment. That was you." I was exercising my rights as a concerned citizen. "You were harassing me because I did not do exactly what you wanted." Her face hardened. "If you are not willing to be reasonable, then this conversation is over." It was over before it started. "Have a good day, Margaret." I drove to work, but her attempt at reconciliation bothered me all day. Margaret did not compromise and she did not give up, which meant she was planning something else. I found out what on Monday. I came home from work to find my mailbox stuffed with papers. Legal papers. Margaret had filed a civil complaint against me in small claims court for creating a private nuisance and diminishing her property value. She was suing me for $5,000 in damages. I sat in my truck, reading through the complaint. She claimed that my deliberate placement of equipment in her sightline was causing her emotional distress, that the visual obstruction was reducing her quality of life, and that the neighborhood dispute was making her home harder to sell, thus diminishing its value. She had attached photos, printed copies of emails, and a statement from a real estate agent claiming that neighborhood disputes could impact property values by up to 10%. I called Derek. "She sued you," he said incredulously. "Over a snow shovel." 2 snow shovels, an ice scraper, a snow brush, and a bag of salt, I corrected. "Apparently they are worth $5,000 in damages." "Can she actually win this?" "I have no idea. I need to talk to a lawyer." I spent Monday evening researching attorneys who handled property disputes and HOA cases. Tuesday morning, I called a firm that specialized in real estate law. They connected me with an attorney named Robert Sanchez, who agreed to meet with me Wednesday after work. Robert's office was in downtown Denver, about 40 minutes from Pine Ridge. He was in his mid-40s, with gray starting at his temples and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen every kind of property dispute imaginable. I explained the entire situation, showing him all my documentation. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. This is textbook HOA overreach mixed with personal vendetta. The good news is that you have an excellent case for defending yourself. The bad news is that defending yourself costs time and money, which is probably what she is counting on. What do you mean? Small claims court has a maximum of $7,500 in Colorado, so she is suing for less than that. Most people, when faced with a lawsuit, will settle just to avoid the hassle and legal fees. She is probably hoping you will agree to move your equipment and pay her a small amount, maybe $1,000, just to make this go away. That is not happening, I said firmly. Robert smiled. Good. Because if we fight this, we will win. You are storing personal property on your own property in a manner that does not violate any laws, local ordinances, or HOA bylaws. Her claim of diminished property value is speculative at best, and emotional distress from seeing a snow shovel is not going to hold up in court. In fact, I think we have grounds for a countersuit. For what? Harassment. You have documented multiple false complaints to government agencies, which constitutes abuse of process. You have evidence of her attempting to create violations where none exist. A judge might be very interested in hearing about her pattern of behavior, not just toward you but toward other residents. The Chens and the Johnsons might be willing to testify, I said, and Mr. Peterson. Then let me talk to them. If they are willing to provide statements, it strengthens our case considerably. In the meantime, do not engage with Margaret directly. All communication should go through me. Do not move your equipment, do not change anything about your routine, and document anything new that happens. I hired Robert on the spot. His retainer was $1,500, which hurt, but I was committed to seeing this through. Margaret had pushed this beyond a neighborhood squabble. She had made it legal, which meant I had to respond legally. Robert reached out to my neighbors, and all three families agreed to provide statements about their experiences with Margaret's enforcement tactics. The Chens described the RV incident and the bogus hotel complaint. The Johnsons detailed being fined for their Christmas lights and having their adult son accused of violating occupancy limits. Mr. Peterson explained how he had been forced to repaint his entire house because Margaret claimed his shutters were off-white instead of cream, despite both colors being on the approved list. The picture that emerged was of an HOA president who used her position to bully residents into submission, filing complaints and levying fines for minor or non-existent violations, and escalating to legal action when people pushed back. The court date was set for 6 weeks out, mid-March. In the meantime, winter continued. Every time it snowed, I cleared my driveway and returned my equipment to its spot. Every morning, I could see Margaret's curtains twitch as she looked out her window. She never approached me again, following Robert's instruction that all communication go through attorneys, but she found other ways to make her displeasure known. The HOA began a sudden crusade about vehicle parking. A new email blast went out reminding residents that vehicles must be parked in garages or driveways, not on the street, except for temporary loading and unloading. Street parking violations would be fined at $100 per day. This particularly impacted the Johnsons, whose adult son Marcus had an older Honda that leaked oil. They kept it in the driveway specifically to avoid staining the garage floor. Now Margaret was patrolling the streets every evening, documenting any car that was not in a garage by 8 p.m. She also started enforcing rules about trash can placement with military precision. Cans could be put out no earlier than 6 p.m. the night before pickup and had to be retrieved by 8 p.m. on pickup day. Violations were $50. The neighborhood was getting fed up. I started hearing from people I barely knew, residents who had received Margaret's warning emails or fine notices for things they had been doing for years without issue. At work, my friend and coworker Jake asked how the HOA situation was going. I filled him in on the lawsuit and Margaret's escalating enforcement campaign. Sounds like she is trying to make everyone's life miserable so they will pressure you to back down, Jake said. Classic dictator move. Make the group suffer for one person's rebellion. That is what Robert thinks too. He says it actually helps our case because it shows a pattern of retaliatory behavior. When is the court date? March 18th. I am putting it on my calendar. I want to hear how this turns out. February was long and cold. Margaret continued her enforcement blitz, and I continued documenting everything. Robert filed our response to her lawsuit and included a countersuit for harassment, demanding $3,500 in damages for the false reports to county and code enforcement, emotional distress from the ongoing harassment, and legal fees incurred defending against a frivolous lawsuit. Margaret's attorney was a guy named Paul Henderson, no relation to my employer. He worked for a firm that did a lot of HOA work. Robert knew him and said he was competent, but tended to take cases at face value without digging too deep. He probably does not know about Margaret's history, Robert told me. She likely presented this as a simple neighbor dispute, not the pattern of abuse that it actually is. Once he sees our evidence and our witness statements, he might advise her to drop it. That did not happen. Instead, Paul responded with an amended complaint, adding claims that my refusal to move the equipment showed willful disregard for community harmony, and that my countersuit was itself retaliatory. They are doubling down, Robert said when he called to tell me, which is fine. We have the evidence. Let them dig the hole deeper. In early March, the neighborhood received notice that the HOA was raising annual dues by 30%, from $400 per year to $520. The reason given was increased enforcement costs and legal expenses related to maintaining community standards. That email caused an explosion. My inbox filled with messages from angry neighbors who realized that Margaret's legal battle with me was going to cost everyone money. Several residents demanded a special meeting to discuss the increase and to review how HOA funds were being spent. Richard and Sandra, the other board members, agreed to hold an open forum on March 10th, 8 days before our court date. The community center was packed. Nearly every household in our 90-home neighborhood sent someone. People were angry, and for the first time, that anger was directed at Margaret instead of at me. Sandra called the meeting to order and tried to explain the dues increase. The HOA has incurred unexpected legal expenses this year, and we need to ensure adequate reserves for operations and enforcement activities. What legal expenses? Someone called out. Is this about Margaret's lawsuit against Xavier? Margaret stood up. That lawsuit is necessary to protect all our property values. When one resident refuses to maintain community standards, it affects everyone. It is a snow shovel, Mrs. Johnson shouted. You are wasting HOA money suing someone over a snow shovel while the mailboxes at the front entrance are falling apart and the playground equipment is 10 years old. Applause erupted. Margaret's face flushed. Mr. Chen stood. I move that we vote to remove Margaret Pemberton as HOA president for misuse of funds and abuse of authority. Second, at least 5 people yelled simultaneously. Richard looked panicked. I do not think we can do that without proper procedure. Actually, we can, said a woman I recognized as Linda Torres, who lived 3 streets over. I looked it up. According to our HOA bylaws, a special election to remove a board member can be called by petition of 25% of homeowners. If we get 23 signatures tonight, we can trigger that election. This is ridiculous, Margaret said. You are all overreacting because you do not want to follow simple rules. No, I said, standing up. They are reacting because you have turned this HOA into your personal fiefdom. You fine people for minor issues. You file false complaints with government agencies. And now you are suing me in civil court over equipment that does not violate any actual rules. And you are doing it all with HOA money that comes from everyone here. You deliberately placed your equipment to harass me. I placed my equipment on my own property in a location that complies with every rule. You are the one who escalated this into harassment and legal action. The room erupted in arguments. Sandra banged a gavel on the table. Everyone calm down. We need to handle this properly. Linda Torres was already walking around with a clipboard. Anyone who wants to sign the petition for a special election, I am collecting signatures. By the end of the meeting, she had 47 signatures. The special election was scheduled for March 24th, 6 days after our court date. Margaret stormed out without speaking to anyone. Richard and Sandra stayed behind, looking shell-shocked. I did not think it would go this far, Richard admitted to me as people filed out. I knew Margaret could be rigid, but I thought she was just trying to keep standards up. She has been bullying people for years, I said. Everyone was too scared to push back because they did not want to be her next target, but she went too far with the lawsuit and now people are done. Sandra sighed. I should have paid more attention. I am sorry, Xavier. This should not have happened. Just make sure that election happens, I said. The neighborhood deserves better. The week before court was tense. Margaret stopped doing her usual patrols and her curtains stayed closed. Her Lexus barely left the garage. Meanwhile, neighborhood support for me was overwhelming. People dropped off cookies, gift cards for coffee, and notes of encouragement. The Chens invited me over for dinner. The Johnsons offered to come to court as character witnesses. Robert prepared our case methodically. He had statements from the neighbors, documentation of all the false complaints, photos showing that my equipment was neatly stored and not actually obstructing anything important, and expert testimony from a real estate agent who confirmed that a neighbor dispute over snow shovels would not meaningfully impact property values. We are as ready as we can be, he told me the day before court. Remember, in small claims court, the judge makes the decision. No jury. You will tell your story, she will tell hers. We will present evidence and the judge will rule. Be calm, be factual, and let the evidence speak. March 18th arrived cold and clear. I wore my best suit and met Robert at the Boulder County Courthouse at 8:30 for our 9 a.m. hearing. Margaret arrived with Paul Henderson at 8:45. She wore a business suit and heels, her hair perfectly styled. We did not acknowledge each other. The courtroom was small, more like a large office than a TV-style courtroom. Judge Patricia Wilson presided. She was in her early 60s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she had heard every ridiculous small claims case imaginable. Judge Wilson called our case at 9:15. Pemberton versus Bradford. This is a claim of private nuisance and property value diminishment. Mrs. Pemberton, you are the plaintiff. Please present your case. Margaret stood. Your Honor, I am the president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. For 2 years, I have worked to maintain the standards and property values of our neighborhood. The defendant, Mr. Bradford, has deliberately undermined those efforts by prominently displaying snow removal equipment in a location specifically chosen to obstruct my view and harass me. When I asked him to move the items in accordance with HOA bylaws, he responded by repositioning them in an even more visible and antagonistic location. This has caused me significant emotional distress and has created a neighborhood dispute that threatens property values. I am seeking damages for the diminishment of my quality of life and the impact on my property value. Paul Henderson presented photos of my driveway with the equipment lined up. As you can see, Your Honor, these items are positioned directly in the sight line from Mrs. Pemberton's front window. This is not a functional arrangement. This is deliberate harassment. Judge Wilson studied the photos. Mr. Bradford, your turn. I stood, my heart pounding. Your Honor, I am storing snow removal equipment on my own driveway in a location that does not violate any HOA rules, local ordinances, or laws. Mrs. Pemberton initially complained that I kept these items on my porch, citing HOA bylaws about not storing equipment in visible locations. When I moved them to my driveway to comply with her interpretation of those rules, she claimed I was harassing her. I am simply keeping my snow removal tools in an accessible location so I can maintain my property during Colorado winters. Robert stood. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation showing that this lawsuit is part of a pattern of harassment by Mrs. Pemberton against Mr. Bradford and other residents of Pine Ridge. May I present evidence? Go ahead. Robert methodically laid out the timeline. The initial complaint about my porch, the emergency HOA meeting, the anonymous reports to county inspectors and code enforcement, which I had confirmed through public records requests, came from Margaret's phone number. The statements from the Chens, Johnsons, and Mr. Peterson detailing similar patterns of harassment. Your Honor, Mrs. Pemberton has a history of using her position as HOA president to bully residents into compliance with her personal preferences, not actual rules. When Mr. Bradford refused to be bullied, she escalated to legal action. This is not about snow shovels or property values. This is about control. Paul objected. Your Honor, the other residents' experiences are not relevant to this case. They are relevant to establishing pattern and intent, Robert countered. Mrs. Pemberton claims emotional distress from seeing snow shovels. We are showing that she has a pattern of manufacturing distress and violations where none actually exist. Judge Wilson held up a hand. I will allow the evidence. Continue, Mr. Sanchez. Robert presented everything. Photos showing that my equipment was neatly organized and no more visible than what other residents had. The real estate expert's testimony that minor neighbor disputes do not meaningfully impact property values, especially when they involve no actual property damage or ongoing illegal activity. Documentation showing that every complaint Margaret had filed against me with government agencies had been investigated and dismissed as unfounded. Then Robert played his ace. Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence this email sent by Mrs. Pemberton to all Pine Ridge residents on March 1st, announcing a 30% increase in HOA dues. The stated reason is legal expenses related to maintaining community standards. Mrs. Pemberton is using funds from 90 households to finance a personal vendetta against one resident who refused to submit to her demands. Judge Wilson read the email, her expression darkening. Mrs. Pemberton, is the HOA funding your lawsuit? Margaret hesitated. The HOA is pursuing this action to protect community interests. That is not what I asked. Is the HOA paying your legal fees for this case? The HOA board authorized legal action to address threats to property values. Did the HOA board vote specifically to sue Mr. Bradford over snow shovels? Another hesitation. I made the decision as president to protect the community. So you are using HOA funds to finance a personal lawsuit without specific board authorization. Judge Wilson looked at Paul. Counselor, are you aware that your client may be misusing shared homeowner funds? Paul looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, I was told this was an authorized HOA action. It was authorized, Margaret insisted. I have the authority as president to take necessary legal action. Robert stood. Your Honor, I have a copy of the Pine Ridge HOA bylaws. Section 8 clearly states that legal action requires a majority vote of the board, not unilateral presidential authority. Mrs. Pemberton never held such a vote. Both other board members, Richard Holloway and Sandra Mitchell, have provided statements confirming they did not vote to authorize this lawsuit. Judge Wilson was not happy. Mrs. Pemberton, you have wasted this court's time with what appears to be a frivolous lawsuit funded by misappropriated HOA money. Mr. Bradford has broken no laws, violated no legitimate rules, and has a clear right to store his personal property on his own land. Your claim of property value diminishment is entirely speculative, and your claim of emotional distress from seeing a snow shovel is frankly absurd. But he did it deliberately to harass me, Margaret protested. He moved his property on his land in response to your complaint. That is not harassment. That is compliance with your demands, just not in the exact way you wanted. You do not get to dictate every aspect of how your neighbors use their property. Judge Wilson reviewed her notes. I am dismissing Mrs. Pemberton's complaint with prejudice. Furthermore, I am awarding judgment to Mr. Bradford on his countersuit. Mrs. Pemberton, you are ordered to pay Mr. Bradford $3,500 in damages for harassment and legal fees. You are also ordered to cease any and all retaliatory actions against Mr. Bradford, including but not limited to filing false complaints with government agencies, imposing invalid HOA fines, or using HOA resources to pursue personal disputes. If Mr. Bradford has to return to this court because you continue this behavior, I will consider sanctions including restraining orders. Do you understand? Margaret's face was white. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Bradford, do you have anything to add? I stood. No, Your Honor, thank you. Case closed. Next case. We filed out of the courtroom. Margaret and Paul disappeared quickly. Robert and I stood in the hallway, and I felt like a weight had lifted off my chest. That went better than expected, Robert said, grinning. Judge Wilson does not tolerate HOA overreach. She has thrown out cases like this before. So it is really over. The lawsuit is over. Margaret has to pay you $3,500 within 30 days. She has been ordered to stop harassing you. And she is facing some serious questions about misusing HOA funds, which could be a separate legal issue for her. What about the special election? That is your neighborhood's decision, but I would say Margaret's credibility is pretty much destroyed. We shook hands and I drove home in a daze. It was only 1 in the afternoon. I had taken the whole day off work, expecting the hearing to last longer. When I got home, several neighbors were waiting in my driveway. Word had spread fast. So, Mrs. Johnson asked eagerly. I won, she lost. The judge dismissed her case and ordered her to pay me damages. Cheers erupted. Mr. Chen actually hugged me. Good for you. Someone finally beat her. The special election is still happening, Linda Torres said. We are not letting her stay in power, even if she is not suing anyone else. The next 6 days were a whirlwind. Margaret's legal defeat became the talk of Pine Ridge. She did not attend the special election meeting on March 24th. The vote was held by secret ballot, and it was not even close. 73 homeowners voted to remove her as president. 8 voted to keep her. 3 abstained. Sandra Mitchell was elected as the new president, with a promise to reform how the HOA operated and to stop using the organization as a personal enforcement squad. One of Sandra's first actions was to commission an audit of HOA finances. That audit, completed in mid-April, revealed that Margaret had spent almost $8,000 in HOA funds on legal fees related to my case, as well as various other complaints she had filed against residents over the years. None of these expenses had been properly authorized by board votes. Sandra called another neighborhood meeting to present the findings. The good news is our overall finances are sound. The bad news is Mrs. Pemberton violated the bylaws by spending money without authorization. The board is considering whether to pursue legal action to recover these funds. Do it, several people said simultaneously. The board voted to send Margaret a demand letter seeking repayment of the $8,000. They gave her 60 days to respond. Meanwhile, Margaret paid me the $3,500 the judge had ordered. The check arrived on April 15th, one day before the deadline. It was made out from her personal account, not the HOA. Life in Pine Ridge slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board under Sandra's leadership took a much more relaxed approach. Enforcement focused on genuine issues like lawn maintenance and exterior repairs, not nitpicking about Christmas lights or snow shovels. The hostile, paranoid atmosphere Margaret had created began to dissipate. In May, a for sale sign appeared in Margaret's yard. I was not surprised. After losing the lawsuit, losing the presidency, and facing demands to repay $8,000, staying in the neighborhood was probably too uncomfortable. Her house sold in 3 weeks. The buyers were a young couple with a toddler named Sam and Emily Miller. I introduced myself when they came to look at the neighborhood. They seemed nice, normal people who just wanted a good place to raise their kid. "How is the HOA here?" Sam asked me. "It used to be rough," I admitted, "but there was a change in leadership recently. The new board is much more reasonable." "That is good to hear. We looked at some places with nightmare HOAs, people getting fined for having the wrong mailbox or leaving their trash cans out 10 minutes too long. We had some of that, not anymore." Margaret and her husband Greg moved out in early June. I happened to be mowing my lawn when the moving truck left. She did not look my way. Greg waved awkwardly. I waved back. Whatever issues I had with Margaret, Greg had always been civil and I had no beef with him. After they left, Derek came over with beer to celebrate. "The great HOA war is finally over," he said, handing me a bottle. "You actually won." "We all won," I said. "The whole neighborhood is better off. So are you going to move your snow shovels now, put them back on your porch?" I looked at my driveway where the snow gear still sat in its organized line. It was June, so the shovels and salt were not currently needed, but I had left them there out of principle. "You know what? I think I will put them in the garage for the summer. But come winter they are going right back there because I can." Derek laughed. "That is the spirit." That evening Sandra called me. "Xavier, I wanted to give you an update. Margaret has agreed to repay the HOA $4,000, half of what she owes. The board voted to accept that settlement rather than pursue further legal action. We all just want to move on." "That is fair," I said. "Is she doing okay? I mean, I know we were enemies, but I do not wish her harm." "That is generous of you, considering what she put you through." "I heard she and Greg are moving to Arizona. Her sister lives there. Fresh start, I guess. I hope it works out for them. You are a good person, Xavier. Thank you for standing up to her. I do not think anyone else would have fought back like you did. Someone had to. Otherwise, she would still be making everyone miserable. True. Anyway, we are having a neighborhood barbecue on July 4th at the community center. I hope you will come. I will be there. The 4th of July barbecue was the best neighborhood event I had attended since moving to Pine Ridge. No tension, no drama, just neighbors enjoying burgers and fireworks. Kids ran around playing tag. Adults talked and laughed. The Chens brought amazing dumplings. The Johnsons made their famous potato salad. Mr. Peterson pulled me aside at one point. I want you to know what you did inspired me. I am 72 years old and I let that woman push me around for 3 years. Made me repaint my whole damn house over nothing. But you stood up to her, and it reminded me that I do not have to take that from anyone. So thank you. You are welcome, Mr. Peterson, but you helped too. Your statement to my lawyer made a difference. Call me Frank, he said, shaking my hand firmly. As summer turned to fall, Pine Ridge continued to thrive under the new HOA leadership. The playground equipment was finally replaced. The entrance mailboxes were repaired. Sandra established a community email list that focused on positive neighborhood news instead of violation warnings. In October, the first snow of the season fell. I pulled out my shovels and cleared my driveway, then positioned them back in their spot at the end of the driveway. This time it was not a statement or a protest. It was just convenient. Emily Miller, the new neighbor in Margaret's old house, waved from across the street. Smart place for them, easy to grab when you need them. That is what I always thought, I called back. She laughed, and that was that. No drama, no complaints, no lawsuits. Just a reasonable person acknowledging a reasonable choice. I went inside and made coffee, looking out my kitchen window at the quiet, snow-covered street. This was what Pine Ridge was supposed to be. A peaceful neighborhood where people could live their lives without constant fear of fines and complaints. The HOA drama had cost me time, money, and stress. But in the end, it had brought the community together and removed a source of genuine toxicity. Sometimes standing your ground is not about winning. It is about showing others that they do not have to live in fear. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. First snow. Did you put your shovels in the strategic position? They are right where they should be, I replied. Perfect. Let me know when Margaret sends another lawsuit. She moved to Arizona, remember? Oh, right. Well, let me know if any cacti start bothering you. I smiled and set down my phone. The snow was still falling, blanketing Pine Ridge in white. Tomorrow I would wake up and clear the driveway again. My shovels would be right there waiting, in the perfect spot, on my property, not bothering anyone. And if someone did not like it, well, they could take it up with me. But I doubted anyone would. We had learned our lesson about letting petty power go unchecked. We had learned the value of standing together against unreasonable demands. Most importantly, we had learned that a snow shovel is just a snow shovel. Nothing more. Nothing less. Unless you are dealing with someone like Margaret Pemberton, in which case it becomes a symbol of everything wrong with unchecked authority in small communities. But Margaret was gone now. The snow shovels remained, practical tools in a practical location. And life in Pine Ridge went on, quieter and happier than before. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that benefit everyone, not just yourself. Margaret learned that the hard way. The rest of us learned it by watching her fall. And in a strange way, I was grateful for the whole experience. It taught me about standing up for what is right, about community solidarity, and about the importance of reasonable leadership. Winter settled in fully by December. We had a white Christmas, the kind Colorado is famous for. I cleared my driveway Christmas morning, waved to Frank Peterson doing the same next door, and helped Emily and Sam dig out their car so they could get to her parents' house for dinner. The neighborhood looked beautiful, covered in snow, lights twinkling on houses, kids building snowmen in yards. This was what we had been fighting for all along. Not the right to put shovels in driveways, but the right to live peacefully without someone constantly looking for reasons to punish and control. As I stood there in the cold, my breath forming clouds in the air, I thought about Margaret. I wondered if she was happy in Arizona, if she had learned anything from what happened, if she missed Colorado winters. Part of me hoped she had found peace. Carrying that much anger and need for control could not have been easy for her either. But mostly, I was just grateful it was over. The shovels stayed in the driveway all winter. No one complained. No one sued. No one called code enforcement or county inspectors. They were just tools doing their job exactly where they needed to be, and that in the end was all they ever needed to be.